Pete ate, drank, and slept basketball.
He lived for it. It was his life. That's what he was born to do.
He was more fun to watch than anybody I've ever seen in the game. Flopping around with his hair, socks hanging down over his shoes, behind his back, through his legs, spinning, shooting from all different angles. He was just a show.
Pistol felt an obligation. He never wanted the fans to feel like they were ever cheated. He wanted to make sure that he did his thing.
He had an element of genius in his personality with the basketball. But then there was a side to him. He had these big, brown, sad-looking eyes.
He was at the top of the mountain. He heard so much roar of the crowd, but there was a lot of heartache and a lot of tragedy that he lived through.
I don't think Pete was ever at peace with Pete Maravich. It wasn't easy being Pistol Pete.
CBS Sports presents Pistol Pete, the life and times of Pete Maravich. He came out of the Louisiana Bayou, an unlikely legend with a skinny frame, tousled hair, and floppy socks. They called him Pistol Pete. He put his signature on everything he did. The thousands of points, the dazzling moves, none of them ever patented. Each one original. Never seen before, never seen again. Nothing Pete Maravich ever did was simple or serene or ordinary. Not in life. Not even on the court, the one place where he should have felt most comfortable, most at ease. Flashy and electric, Pete turned basketball into theater. For better or worse, he was the consummate showman, always in the spotlight, always on center stage.
Before the game would start, during the national anthem, he'd look up at the flag and then he'd look over to the scoreboard and
It's showtime.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. Last show, don't get your money's worth. With this show, it happened all right. You gotta see the show. It's a dynamo. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll. Oh, right before your eyes, we put laughter from the skies. And he laughs until he cries. And he dies, and he dies. Come inside, the show's about to start. Guaranteed to blow your head apart. You gotta see the show. It's a dynamo. You gotta see the show. It's rock and roll.
He was revolutionary. What he did, no one had ever done before. Nobody had ever handled the ball like that. He did things with the ball that Bob Cousy in his dreams at night could not do.
He was really an artist, a dancer, a person who played with music in his ears, and you could not stop him.
He could go from inline to inline with the basketball in the heat of battle. Quicker, faster than anyone I'd ever seen.
You could see his eyes light up from time to time because he knew it was going to mess you up along the way. You know, he was going to do something to just undress you. Whoa.
Pete made the ball disappear. One guy back, the guy was backpedaling, and then Pete swiped at the ball like this to tip it over here and hit over the ball. The defensive man went that way, and he slapped it back this way. And the referee called traveling on him. He said, traveling? How do you know it was traveling? You have never seen anyone do that before.
We just bounce around out there, and the ball just seemed like it was something that he had from the time he was in a cradle, creating different ways in which to just display his love for the game. And here was a guy who was a basketball genius.
Come see the show.
Coming up, as his father charts his course for success, the legacy of Pete Maravich begins. Welcome back to Pistol Pete.
It was not uncommon that we'd be at the YMCA by 8 o'clock in the morning. A lot of times I'd just sit against the wall saying, God, I've been here 10 hours. What am I doing here? Yeah, I play basketball and I can keep up with anybody. I couldn't even begin to keep up with him. Pete said, stay with me and let me shoot foul shots and we can leave when I miss one. I said, fine. 178 foul shots later, we left. He may have missed it on purpose so I could leave.
When he was in high school, he would get the center circle, probably 110 degrees in the gym. He just dribbled, not go outside the circle, and just go between his legs, behind his back and everything, go for 10 straight minutes. He'd be sopping wet.
All hours of the day and night. In the coldest of days, I've seen him in the rain. Pete would be out bouncing the basketball. Ball bouncing on concrete, you can hear it for a mile. And I used to get aggravated in the middle of the night listening to that ball bounce off that concrete up there. I'd see Pete out there doing these things, and he'd make believe, and he'd talk to himself. 2 seconds to go, and we're behind by one. We won. Maravich scores.
For the Maravich family, life in America began in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. In the 1930s, Aliquippa was a tough town of steel mills and hard men, one of whom was Pete's father, Press. Like nearly all of his contemporaries, Press was destined to work in the mill, a dead-end existence from which there was little hope of escaping.
We're coming out of the throes of the Depression. The hours were long and tedious. Pay was very minimal. These were all exposed steel-making units. Lit the sky at night, and you know when you're coming in from any direction, you say, well, we're near Aliquippa.
The sulfur dioxide permeated the air. There was soot that used to collect. When you walked on the porch, it would just crunch under your feet. You would change your shirt 3 and 4 times a day. You didn't know when your husband went to work if he was coming home that day because the work was so hard. Press Maravich wanted more and wanted to do better. That's why he went to college. That's why he played basketball. That was his way out of the mill.
Press Maravich was good enough at basketball to earn a scholarship to Davis and Elkins College, where he set many school scoring records and eventually went on to play professionally. After 3 seasons, weary of the travel and no longer the player he once was, Press went into coaching, first at his alma mater, Davis and Elkins, later at Aliquippa High, where he earned an iron-tough reputation.
Press would run us like crazy, up and down the steps, around the gymnasium. I mean, just by looking at him. He put that steely look on you, and you knew he meant business. He was a very good disciplinarian. He made you aware of what was important, and he demanded you to do it that way, that's all.
He was a driver, and he was committed. That was evident in Pistol Pete. Well, I think Pistol was in diapers when Press wanted to bounce a ball in front of him, and I knew that he was on his way.
When Pete Maravich was born on June 22nd, 1947, Press began the process of molding his son in his own image.
Press had one goal in life, and that was to make Pete the best basketball player in the world.
It was all he had to give. He didn't have money. He knew basketball, and that was the only thing he had to pass on to Pete.
He would have Pete take that basketball and put it through his legs and around his back.
Dribbled right-handed 2 minutes, left-handed 2 minutes, and behind his back 2 minutes. So he had a little checklist, and Pete followed it religiously.
And he never stopped. He had him do it every day, time after time after time. His daddy was always challenging him and making him carry a basketball. He had to have a basketball in his hand his entire life.
Press gave him a basketball, and Pistol used it as a pillow. He slept on it. He was programmed to play.
You never saw him without a basketball. He was always doing something, twirling it on his finger.
He'd ride a bicycle and dribble the ball. He'd dribble the ball everywhere he went. Press would drive the car, and Pete would get in the back seat. And one time around the block, he would be hanging out the right-hand side with the glass down, dribbling the ball. The next time around, he'd move to the left-hand side of the car and dribble with his left hand.
He was riding from the back of the school on his knees, dribbling a basketball out the window. When he got out of the car, it wasn't the fact he had done something special, but he was needling the guy in the car. I told you I could do it. I told you I could do it.
He dribbled a basketball down the sidewalk. He took it to the movie with him.
I've been in a movie when he dribbled in there. People swore at him, you know. That didn't bother him. With the left hand for about half the movie, changing seats on the other side of the aisle and dribbling with his right hand.
He would bounce it off of chairs. He would bounce it off the arm. He would be bouncing it off of people's head until he irritated somebody. Then they would go get the management. Out he would go.
You'd see him something like that, you know. You know what his mind was on. I'd say, "Where's our mind?" And he'd just grin and get his pencil and start his work again. He would work when he was in class, but when he was out, he got to where he wasn't turning in the work. Says, "I don't have much time." I said, "Why not? Sometime I'm playing basketball at 6 o'clock in the morning and at 9 o'clock at night." He says, "Now, when do I have time to do my work?" I said, "Well, talk to your father about it." So his father came up to talk. And he said, "Well," says, "I'm wanting Pete to be a basketball player. This is not that important." Well, I says, "We differ there. I think it is important." I says, "He's going to want to go to college." "Don't worry about that. I'll get him in college. Pete's going to do well in this basketball." Says he'll probably make more money at that than you'll ever make teaching. He wanted to do what his father wanted him to do, and that speaks well of him.
Coming up next, Pete begins his basketball career and becomes one of the best high school players in the country.
There were 5 or 6 fellows in the neighborhood that were about the same age, and we'd play touch football. Sometimes we'd play tackle football. Little did we know that one of the guys we were playing with would be Maravich. But it's funny, we didn't think of that when we were kids. He was just Pete to us.
In 1956, when Pete was 9, Press Maravich became the head coach at Clemson. Under his father's watchful eye, Pete continued his basketball education.
He was always playing somebody better than him, somebody bigger than him, somebody stronger than he was.
He was always scrimmaging with college kids even when he was in 7th, 8th grade. Bones McKinney, who was the head coach at Wake Forest, had Cousy down there, and Cousy participated in the scrimmage. Press Maravich inserted Pete, and Pete threw a long bounce pass with some English on it that someone picked up for a layup, and Cousy grabbed the ball and put it under his arm and said, "Time out. Who in the hell is that kid?"